find the answers, do those things, engage yourself, see if you can do them, put in the time, and just keep trying. Don't give up. Be like Leonardo, have doubts, but push forward, work harder. Don't kill yourself. Take time to enjoy life, but you can do it. Find the strength, push yourself.
Hello there. You're listening to Ignite Your Passion with me, Bonnie Lang. Today's guest is Chris Warner. He's an author, publisher, and public speaker. He's just released his 25th book and believes people operate best within their strengths. And he ascribes faithfully to what his longtime mentor, Coach Del Brown, yes, Shaq's former coach, asserts that the biggest journey a person will take in life is learning oneself, and that once you embrace change, you will manifest your destiny. Your thought pattern will determine your life pattern. Chris is a firm believer that education is the key to happiness and success in life, and you'll hear his passion for storytelling in this interview. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. If you know someone that loves what they're doing, send me a message. I'd love to have them as a guest. Well, I am super excited, Chris, to just get to meet you. One of my neighbors, Joel, actually introduced me to you, to everything that you are doing. And I was so excited. I couldn't wait to have you here. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's nice and humid here in South Louisiana, but I'm in the AC inside, and I'm glad to be with you. You're a creative person, and I like creative people.
Thank you. Right back at you. So tell us about yourself. First off, tell us where you're from and where you're living.
Yeah, I'm from New Iberia, Louisiana, where your friend Joel is from. We grew up as neighbors there. New Iberia is along the Bayou Teche in South Louisiana, and in the place they call Acadiana, kind of an inverted triangle of parishes in South Louisiana, where the Cajuns live. And if you grow up in New Iberia, you are undoubtedly a Cajun. Now, I don't sound like that anymore because I pronounce all my syllables, but I lived away for many years. For the last 20 years, I've lived in Alabama and Florida. But now I'm back in South Louisiana, living in Donaldsonville. And I chose Donaldsonville because it's smack dab in the center of South Louisiana. I'm an hour from the French Quarter in New Orleans. I'm about 30 minutes from Baton Rouge, the state capital. And I'm 90 minutes from my hometown of New Iberia, where my mom still lives. And Joel's mom still lives 2 doors down from her.
So. It's so funny because with the accent, like Joel does have an accent still. And it's funny because I did have him on a podcast that was during the holidays. He was reading a Cajun Christmas book, and he was reading it with the Cajun accent, and it was super cool. I had him and his wife on the podcast, Joyce. And so, yeah, they're incredible people. We feel so blessed to have them in our lives.
Well, that's wonderful. Joel comes from a great family, and the Cajun accent is really cute. When I was younger, I'm certain that I sounded more like that. I went off to school and studied at LSU and the University of New Orleans, and somewhere along the way of doing radio and television and speaking for a living, I started to pronounce all my syllables. But when I get back over there, I can sound like that again, Shaq. You know what I mean? Maybe if I have a beer or two, especially. So.
I love it. So tell us what you do for a living.
I write books for a living. I'm an author person, and there are very few people who can say that they write books. Less than 1% of the people are authors who write and publish books. So I've written 25 books. I'm 53 years old, and I've done nonfiction and fiction and children's books and cookbooks and quote books. And, I have been busy the last few years, averaging over a book a year. So I have a personal goal of 50 books. I'm well on my way. I have 26 and 27 on my computer right now. I need to publish those. And so, I just keep plugging.
That's incredible. So what first ignited your passion for this?
Well, I always had a way with words, and people used to always say, wow, you're a good writer and that sort of thing. And I was 28 years old. I had just gotten married. I've been married one time, and I was married 13 years, and I've been divorced 13 years, and I have 2 kids, 2 girls. They're lovely and doing well.
No.
But I was just recently married, and I was doing my taxes. My wife said, "You go to the accountant, you sit down with him, bring him our W-2s." We both had salary jobs, so it was pretty straightforward. And the accountant who was doing it out of his garage, he said, I read your column in the Tiger Rag magazine. I was writing a sports column at the time about LSU football. And I was also getting a PhD at the time in urban planning and using the library quite a bit, spending a lot of time in the library and when I took a break at one point, I said to myself, I need to go and find a book that I'd like to read. And so I looked at the sports history section and found a book called Educators and Athletes by Nathan Doherty, who was the father of the University of Tennessee Athletic Department. And it was all about football, college football, and the history of college football after the Civil War. It was fascinating. They talked about ringers and tramp athletes, guys who were the forerunner of professional athletes in America. They were paid to play football. Imagine that, like we're dealing with that today now. So it's all come full circle. But I wrote some columns about that, things that I gleaned from that very interesting book. And the accountant said, I read your columns in the Tiger Rag, and they're excellent. And we should take your columns and publish a book out of your columns. And then you and your wife would be able to write off all of your expenses. He said, it would save you guys quite a bit of money. And I said, really? I said, what if I wrote a real book? And he said, well, you'd still get to take the deductions, but we might have to look for more deductions if you wrote a good book. And he said, I imagine you would. He said, you're a good writer. And I thought, I need to do this. And he said, yeah, man, I'm looking out for you. I'm your accountant. So I started to think about what I might want to write about. And the first book that I wrote is still the best-selling book that I have out of all the books. And it's called The Tailgater's Guide to SEC Football. And it landed me on the History Channel. It has a history of college football in the South, links to the Civil War, like I mentioned earlier, why Southerners are so gaga about football. And I give you a history of the league, the Southeastern Conference, the paragon of the college athletic experience, history of the individual schools, beginning with Alabama, how they acquire their mascots, colors, nicknames, profiles of great players and coaches, where to go out to eat and drink all the town so you can take over when you get there, bail bondsmen, hospitals if things go south, recipes named after the schools, Crimson Tide seafood gumbo, Razorback jambalaya, Death Valley crawfish etouffee. My brother's a Cajun chef, and I was able to steal some of his recipes. So it has a little bit of something for everyone. And the book was successful right out of the gate. I printed 2,500 copies. I self-published the book. Now, at that time in 2000, there was still a pejorative term used to describe people like me that would go out and publish their own book. This was actually before the digital press. They were still putting it on plates. And I was called a vanity publisher, someone who couldn't get a real publisher, but I went and published my own book. I had to put up the money to do it. You do not hear this term anymore because now it's really the standard. People are realizing you don't have to get a big publisher and you don't have to print 10,000 books. You can print 1,000 books or 500. You pay more per unit if you print less books, but you still have ownership of the books. You have full ownership. You don't have to share the profits with a publisher. So I got into it, and from the gate, I was successful from the onset, and that kind of got me hooked and gave me the envie, which is French, to want to write more books. And so I did, and I did an SEC baseball book and an SEC basketball book, and from there I did a couple of quote companions, and then I wrote my first novel after that, The Tiger Among Us, with a recon Marine who's an Air Force pararescueman. And that was my first stab at writing and telling a story, which I particularly like to do. I prefer to tell true stories because they have more meaning to people. Most people want to read a true story. So that was how I got into writing. That was my foray. My accountant suggested that I should do it because it would save me money.
Well, aren't you glad you did?
Right.
Is he still your same accountant?
No, I don't think we used him after that even. I'm not sure, but he steered me in the right direction. It's just funny how things go in life. People that you meet influence you, and but I naturally gravitated toward my passion. It's something that I was always good at. In the seventh grade, I recall I was going to an all boys Catholic school, and my English teacher, she purchased or brought to class a large box that it probably housed a washing machine or a dishwasher, and she cut a square out, and we had to sit in the box and pretend that we were like a TV show host and host a show, just I guess for 5 minutes. I don't know what the challenge was specifically, but I did it, and I had the whole class in stitches. I had my teacher, bent over laughing, and then I watched all my other counterparts in the class get up and present their version, and it just wasn't as entertaining. And I thought at that time, I remember thinking, maybe I'm creative, maybe I'm a little different than everyone else. And I'm certainly different because these things come easy to me, and I certainly could be tagged as a creative person.
So what was your previous career path?
Well, when at the time that I was talking to the accountant, I worked for the governor's office in Louisiana. I had a master's degree in public administration, and so I was working in the government field, and I was nearing the completion of a doctorate. And so I did teach for a while. I taught college and high school, and then in 2010, I met a man who I wrote a book about, and he convinced me to drop out of the real world and just pursue my passion of writing books and to try to focus on, he encouraged me to focus on having fun and pursuing what I really wanted to do most with my life. And so I did that, and I just became a full-time author. Of course, I was fortunate because this man was extremely wealthy and powerful. He owned the famous Floribama Lounge on the Alabama-Florida line. And after I wrote his story, Bushwhacked at the Floribama, he implored to me, why don't you quit your job and just sell your books at the Floribama? We'll set you up behind the gift shop where there's a glut of inhumanity that passes every day. We would frisk people for guns and booze and that sort of thing. And I had a table across from where they were being frisked. I would implore for them to write on the board where they were from, what town. And every day it's different. We get people from all around the world and America. And, they would invariably say, did you write all these books on the table? And I'd say, yes, I did. Would you like one? I'll sign one for you. And so if I didn't catch them coming in, I usually catch them coming out because they were a lot more relaxed. They had heard a bunch of music and usually had a couple of bushwhackers or beers and usually had laughed and had a good time because that's what people do every day at the Floribama. They have fun. And so I did that for about 9 years, where I was able to hone my craft of getting people to like me first and then to see me as an author and then want to buy one of my books. And so that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. It was flip-flops and t-shirts every day for 9 years. And of course it got cool sometimes, but for the most part, it's beautiful in Pensacola. It's always sunny, and we were right on the beach. So,
I love it. Love it. So you have so many books. I was reading the synopsis of each of your books, and they're all so intriguing in so many different ways. So if someone was to start, like, what book would you recommend they start with?
That's like recommending your favorite child. That's always a difficult question. I have a book called The Wagon to Disaster that's been featured on American Greed, 60 Minutes, and Netflix. It's a white collar crime story. It's about Aaron Beam is the subject, and the book is written first person through his eyes. So I'm kind of like the ghost writer. I'm listed on the book as with Chris Warner. But I told him to start at the beginning, and he would longhand write out his story. I said, start at the beginning when you met Richard Scrushy. And Richard Scrushy is a narcissist sociopath. He thinks he's smarter than everyone. He lacks empathy for people, and he has to be the cynosure, the center of attention. And Aaron met him, and they together formed Health South Corporation in Birmingham, Alabama. and it became a Fortune 500 company. It was the outpatient rehab company, like McDonald's of outpatient rehab, and it was just extremely successful. Their stock skyrocketed. But normally, there's a law of diminishing returns in business. You can have a successful company, but the market is only so large. It will stabilize your profits after a while. There's only so many people you can reach and treat. And the CEO, Richard, did not accept that. And he forced a team of accountants, even after Aaron refused to cook the books any longer, to just make up numbers for 10 years so they could maintain their profligate lifestyle. And of course, that's against the law. It's against Sarbanes-Oxley, the law that specifically mandates that every accountant report truthfully. They have to sign it reminds them every time they sign annually on the comprehensive annual financial report. So that's a fascinating book because it deals with the psychology of greed and what people will do to become rich. And when you're dealing with a narcissist sociopath, someone who is just bent on getting what they want and they don't have empathy for people, you can see how they can trick people because they know what they want. They want to be rich like him. And he was extremely adept at fooling people. And so that's a fascinating story. The Netflix documentary of 2 hours on Trial by Media King Richard and about Richard Scrushy is fantastic. I recommend that. And it's also on American Greed and 60 Minutes. They've all been played many times. And Aaron Beam still speaks all over the country, but it's a fast book. In paperback, I think it's 150 pages. It reads like a novel. It has a rising action, a climax, and a denouement, but it's a true story. So it's a true crime novel, which is a rare type of book that appeals to all human beings because of the form it takes, and that it really grabs you, gets your attention, and it's a quick ride, and it teaches you some powerful lessons. And most people really like that book because it's brief, but it has such a powerful story it tells.
Oh, wow, incredible. So there's a couple of other books that are actually based on a non-fictional person.
Yeah, I wrote a book about Joe Gilchrist at the Floribama, his life story out there. His is particularly good because when I met him, he was filing for bankruptcy. So when I met him, we had a couple of beers at the Floribama, and he surprised me with an impromptu meeting next door with all his stockholders. And I walked into a room and there were 40 people, and he instructed me to sit down. And that's when I knew something was up. And he told everyone he had lost $40 million and that he had to sell the Floribama to save himself and the bar. And that was a doozy. I wasn't ready for that, but it was a great way to start the book, and that's how it starts. We proceed from there to go backwards and tell you how he began at the Floribama, how he bought it for a song on his 36th birthday and created all these zany events to get people there, and how he built his business by smiling and being kind, and how he attracted all these wonderful songwriters from around the world and created the Frank Brown Songwriter Festival, which is one of the finest in the country. And basically how he was basically Tom Sawyer. He got people to paint the fence and pay him daily. He was a genius at human relations. Joe treated people with such kindness and sincerity and remembered their dignity that they always wanted to come back again. He'd buy them their first drink or two and thank them profusely for lowering their standards and being there with him. And he's just a gracious fellow and a tremendous person to get to know and see again and again. He created a fabulous business. It's a $25 million annual business. It's open every day of the year, the Floribama. So I wrote that book. I wrote a book with Ulysses Long, who was introduced to me by Coach Dale Brown, the LSU basketball coach who found Shaquille O'Neal. Ulysses had spent 20 years in the Louisiana penitentiary system, and Coach Brown heard that Ulysses had given us, or was giving a speech at the penitentiary called "The Choices You Make in Life Make You as a Person." And Coach put all the boys, Shaq and all the other basketball players, on the bus, took them out to Angola Penitentiary, heard the speech, and Coach Brown said, that was fantastic. Ulysses, if I can help you, write me a letter. And Ulysses wrote Coach Brown, and he said, please get me out of prison. And Coach Brown asked the warden, he said, before I help this man, is he a good person? And he said, he's the best inmate I have. He's been here 20 years. And Coach Brown began to petition Edwin Edwards, the 4-term Cajun governor, who just recently passed away a couple years ago. And he convinced him to pardon him. So it's a fantastic story. The book takes you through his tortuous odyssey in the penitentiary system, the penal system in Louisiana. And it explains perfectly to the reader how if you commit a crime against a woman or a child or an elderly person, someone who's vulnerable, that everyone in the prison has a right to kill you the first day you're there. So it's a harrowing story. It's one that depicts prison life clearly. And it's a bit rough to read at times because it deals with prison life and how tough it can be for the weak.
Wow, sounds so fascinating. I mean, it must have been so intriguing and just inspiring to hear these stories.
Yeah, we can find inspiration in other people, and people always ask me, where do you get your story ideas? Well, I get them from other people invariably because people come to me. They understand that I'm a storyteller, and they say, I have a story. But most of us have a story. It's just deciding to write about something that other people will find interesting, and that's the difficult part. And then you have to market the story. You have to be able to sell it to people, but usually I can tell if a story has merit, and it has to titillate people. It has to intrigue them, and thankfully I have a good eye for a good story, what entails a good story. It helps to have celebrity involved, it often does. And those 3 stories that I talked about, there's an element of celebrity factor, a celebrity factor in each one. The Floribama's world famous. Coach Dale Brown found Shaquille O'Neal, and he's widely known as a motivational speaker. And then the Health South scandal, has been on national television. So it's one of the biggest healthcare frauds in American history at $3 billion. So, you want to look for that when you want to write a story, because the world is full of mediocre books. There really are many out there that have been published that probably shouldn't have been. And it's costly if you're going to get into the printing business. You don't want to have a pile of books in your locker or your garage. In fact, John Grisham, when he got his start, printed 5,000 copies of A Time to Kill. He was a young lawyer in Mississippi, and he believed in his ability to tell a story, and he wrote A Time to Kill. And he printed 5,000 copies, and they languished in his garage because he really didn't know how to sell it. He didn't have an idea. He'd go to fairs and festivals. He would try to sell them at the local ladies clubs and things of that sort. And he sold a few, and people gave him credit for writing a good book, but he wasn't able to move a lot. And it's not an easy thing. It really isn't. And so he had a flood that took about 2,000 or more of the books because it soiled them. He got into his garage. And so he piled them in a friend's truck and brought them out to the dump. And he was kicking the soiled books they were ruined into the dump, into the landfill. And he was incensed, and it motivated him. And he got home and he sent a copy of A Time to Kill to every publishing house he could get an address for. And one small publishing house wrote back and said, this isn't bad. Would you write another lawyer book? They're really not that popular right now, but we'll take a chance on you. And they gave him a modest advance, and he wrote The Firm. And The Firm sold 9 million copies. And for a long time, it was the best-selling piece of fiction ever written. It was surpassed by the Da Vinci Code. And the Da Vinci Code sold more because it attacks the Catholic Church. And there are people all around the world who loathe the Catholic Church. And so that's really what fueled the sale of the Da Vinci Code, was the enmity for the Catholic Church.
And then all of those were made into movies.
Yes. And, John Grisham has written many other books since. And he's an excellent storyteller. I would say that he's a better storyteller than he is a writer. And there's a difference, there's an author from my hometown, James Lee Burke, who has written all these detective novels, and he's a fantastic writer and novelist and storyteller. He's all of those things. He can really turn a phrase with poetic devices that make you go, wow, I want to read that again. Whereas John Grisham is more of the storyteller. He can really craft a yarn. He can tell you a great story that has meaning, allegory. So I'm a fan of both of those guys, and I've read their books.
So do you have to get permission, or do you have some type of release that they have to sign for the book, or do you share the rights in the book? How does that work?
Yeah, usually if I'm going to write a book with them, I'll usually agree to publish the book. That means I'll put the money up for the book, and then we'll have an agreement between the two of us on how they'll be compensated. And then we go from there, and I'll write the book. Because principally, they can't have a book without me because they don't know how to write one, and they really don't know how to publish one either. And it's more lucrative to be the publisher than the author. So in this case, I'm kind of both. But they came to me with their story, and they get what they wanted. They're able to tell their story and say they have a book, and they offer their book, even though I wrote it. But they are still the principal author because it's their story, and it had to come from their mouth. You see, in Aaron Beam's case, he would pen it longhand, and I would transcribe it. In Joe Gilchrist's case, I would just interview him, and he would tell me, and I wrote it. So in different ways you can do it. Ulysses Long had taken a stab at writing his own book in a Word document, and he had printed it out, and it was 400 pages, double spaced, and I asked him to give me the file. And from the file, I whittled it down to 160 pages. And so reorganized it and made it more digestible and considerate to the reader. And that's important as an author, to be considerate to the reader, to impart the story in as few words as possible and still be creative. Whether I tell a fictional story or a non-fictional story, and people much prefer the latter because it's real. Mark Twain said, truth is stranger than fiction. Fiction needs to only make sense. So when I tell a nonfiction story, it's much more appealing to people, particularly when it's unbelievable, like some of these stories,
Yeah.
So, but creative nonfiction is a real thing. You can still use the poetic devices, which is how you bring color to your writing. And a good writer doesn't tell you, they show you through imagery, and the imagery comes from poetic devices, simile and metaphor primarily.
I'm so excited. We're getting ready to go on vacation, and so I'm going to have to download several of your books.
Yeah.
This is so incredible. This is so intriguing. So I've gotten goosebumps several times already. You are an incredible speaker.
Well, thank you. Yeah, goosebumps are a good indicator that you're alive. I always tell people that. I got goosebumps the other day when the LSU girls won the national championship. I was listening while I was driving, and to hear the excitement of the announcer gave me goosebumps. And it's always a reminder that you're still here on planet Earth, and you're very much alive.
Definitely. It seems like, yeah, you're definitely very passionate about the writing, and reading the synopsis, I'm just, super excited. That's why I was asking, what should we start with?
Well, it's interesting you say about the synopsis. People often ask me, how do you write a book? How do you get started? And, I'll have an idea. If the story is coming from someone else, they'll tell me the gist of what it is, and I'll sit and listen. And it might take a week or two, or I might have to read through a lot of the things that they're writing, and they start to get into it, and then they tell me. And once I have a gist of the beginning, the middle, and the end, the first thing that I do is I write the jacket or the synopsis. It's what you'll pick up when the book is finished. And what that is it's a promise to the reader, but it forces me to craft the beginning, the middle, and an end in a way that makes it enticing. And people always say, that's what you do first. Most people would do that at the end. And But this way, it forces me to be really creative and to think ahead and to think of what the beginning, the middle, and the end is. So I have a good construct in my brain of where I'm going. And then I just need to connect the dots. And so we know that if it's a true story, we know the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's when I write fiction that I don't necessarily know the end when I'm starting. So that again, I write the synopsis. So it forces me to complete that beginning, middle, and end before I start. And, I have the type of brain where I can see all of that in my head. I don't know if you've ever heard what a synesthete is. A synesthete is someone who is kind of blessed with creativity. Novelists are often synesthetes. Some of them even see sounds and hear colors. They usually have a very good vocabulary. One of the things that many synesthetes have is they see a number line in their brain. And I absolutely do. I can see all the numbers on a number line. It zigzags up into infinity, and I can see every number on the line, which is really strange. I thought everyone could see that. But I have the type of brain where I can piece all of the parts of the story together before I start. So this type of work that I do, I'm cut out for it. This is really what I should be doing, because few people have the ability to see an entire story in their brain before they write it. There are people on the planet, there's a 60 Minutes episode about it. They remember everything that they did, what they wore every day of their lives. So the brain is extremely powerful, and each of us are different. Each of us have different capabilities. But I absolutely am predestined or predetermined to be a writer, a storyteller, because my brain is set up for that type of thing. I have the vocabulary, my vernacular is there, it's sound. I don't ever have a loss for words. So the words are always there for me. And, again, good writers don't tell you, they show you through imagery, and you have to be able to use the poetic devices, and you have to be able to be creative. It's interesting. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was at Floribama, and I went through the spiel of all the books on the table, 15, 16 books that I had in print. And there's a father and a mother and 2 sons. And I made it through all the books, one end of the table to the next. They sat there, they stood there quietly and listened. And the wife said, "My husband is really intrigued by you." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yes, he's a PhD in creativity." And I said, "Really, Doc?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what is it? What makes a creative person?" And he said, "There's many competing theories out there." He said, "But I think it comes down to intelligence." And I was flattered by that. But he said, "You guys just get it, you just come up with it." And creative people are gifted in that they come up with new things. They might be able to write a song, they might be able to write a book, they might be able to invent something. But the things that they do make a difference in the world, because the things that they make and create did not exist before them. And so creative people, troubadours, poets, musicians who play instruments, artists who draw, any type of an actor, an actress, any type of screenwriter, anyone who creates something makes our world a better place. It would be boring without creative people.
It's interesting. The word that you used for that, where you can just basically lay everything out. What did you call that again?
The synopsis?
Oh, no, synthet.
Oh, the synesthete.
Yeah, synesthete. So
Yeah, it's Synesthete. And the Discovery Channel did an hour-long thing on it. It was very, very interesting. And these tend to be uber creative people who are just kind of predisposed to really write, and a lot of novelists are synesthetes, but they are just really creative. It's interesting, like on the intelligence test, it discerns whether you're left brain or right brain. I remember every time I take it, I'm like right in the middle. I'm like 50-50. So I I could have been an engineer, I could have been a lawyer, I could have been a lot of different things. But I have a good mind, but also it's interesting how I can catalog facts. It's interesting how I can see everything in its proper order. And I think that's why I see the number line. That's such a simple thing if you think about it. Numbers all have a place and they have order. And that's why I like telling a true story, because we know the beginning, the middle, and the end in a true story. Everything you watch on American Greed, everything you watch on 60 Minutes, these documentary programs, these are true stories. So you have the facts and they're ordered in chronology, how things happen. And my job is to tell the story truthfully.
Yeah.
And when you go get a PhD, that's what they pound into your head. You have to tell the truth. You have to back up your sources where you've got your information. But when you're telling a story in a novel form that you make up, you just have to make it make sense. Because if you tell too elaborate of a story, people will be like, I don't know about that, So it's interesting. You can get, I guess, too creative or too outlandish, and then it becomes science fiction, which I'm really not a fan of. I read some of that when I was a kid, but I prefer just to tell a good fictional story based on something, on a true story that I've read, and that makes it even more believable.
Yeah. Oh, so incredible. I was thinking when you were talking about the numbers again, like we were watching Avatar. I don't know if you've seen the most recent Avatar.
Yeah, I saw the water world one, and they're in the water world.
Did you watch the extras in how everything came together? We didn't even, that's like 2 hours worth. It's like another.
I liked it better than the first one. I liked it a lot. I thought it was better than the first one.
It actually shows you like all the creativity, everything that really went into this movie. You don't realize how much work, and it took them 5 years to create this. But for someone to actually see this and to be able, and I know he had other people, but I can't even fathom, get my head around how you even just start this concept. And, I mean, it's a huge movie, 5 years in the making. It was
long. I think 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's long.
Yeah.
Very entertaining, beautiful story, and I liked it. I liked it more than the first. I thought it was better.
Yeah, but I wanted to throw that in there because I believe, he as a filmmaker, James Cameron, has that.
Absolutely. The best thing that I ever watched on a television was Breaking Bad. About Walter White. Have you seen that?
I've never seen it.
And one of the things that I wanted to impart, because I always address this when I give a speech on how to write a book, is that the surefire way to get people to engage as a reader in your story is to provide background on your main character or subject that creates empathy in the reader. Because all of us as human beings, when we relate to a character and we see ourselves in the character, or we see goodness in the character, it's really difficult to root against the subject or the main character, the protagonist, they call it. In Walter White's case in Breaking Bad, and I know people in your audience will know who that is because Breaking Bad has a 98% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And I'm thinking, who are these two idiots who didn't believe it was a good show? But Vince Gilligan is the creator. He's my age. He's 53. And he wrote this in his early 40s, but it's fabulous. And Walter White is a chemist. He's a high school teacher. Many of his colleagues have gone on to make billions of dollars in the pharmaceutical industry. But Walter is a high school chemistry teacher because that's what he enjoys in life. And he finds out he has cancer. And then he realizes with a young baby and a son who has MS and a modest home that he's going to be leaving his family with nothing. And Walt's a good guy. And you can see he's a good guy. And you feel sorry for him and his plight in life. The world has really frowned on Walt. That's personification, by the way. The world frowned on Walt. And so you root for Walter And his brother-in-law is an enigmatic character in the story. He's a DEA agent. And he says, to cheer Walt up, he says, why don't you come along with me? We're going to arrest this meth head. So Walt actually goes in the car, in the DEA car, and watches as kind of like the SWAT team assails this house. And Walt sees the meth head climb out a window on top with his girlfriend on a balcony and escape. He evades capture. But he recognizes that the meth head is one of his former high school students, and he makes note of it. And then the next day he goes and visits him at his house after he goes and checks out his address at the school. And he says to him, so you make meth, huh? And he goes, what's it to you? And Walt says, because I can make it a lot better than you can. And that begins their odyssey of making meth together, because Walt wants to make money to take care of his family because he thinks he's going to die of cancer.
Okay.
So that begins their odyssey of making meth, and it begins the transformation of Walter from this meek, caring, loving father and teacher into a meth producer and then drug kingpin. And you watch him morph from protagonist to antagonist, where he becomes the anti-character, someone you should loathe. But because of the powerful empathy that he has introduced in the beginning, and you feel so sorry for his predicament in life, and you later learn that his cancer is in remission and he's okay, you still want to root for him. And I saw myself to the very end rooting for Walter. And then in the final scene, he finally gets it and he dies. And I was like, he deserved that. But I rooted for him till the very end because of that powerful introduction of who he once was. He was good.
Yeah.
And there's something in us as human beings where once we are introduced to a character that's inherently good like that, and you place them in a difficult situation, you want to read to find out what happens to them. It's hard to put the book down. And so empathy is important.
What do you want people to go away with when you read, like, or whenever they're reading your book? Do you, like, every time you start writing, do you think this is what I want, how I want them to feel? Or
That's a good question. My job is to tell a story, but the larger meaning or hidden meaning of the story is called allegory. And allegory comes from the narration or the narrative. For instance, I can tell you the story, but then maybe at the end of each paragraph, I serve as the narrator and I kind of tease you along about what you need to really be understanding. For instance, if I say that Bill died is a story. Now, there's a lot about that story that I didn't tell you, but Bill died, that's a story that could run on the news. Now, the narrative could be Bill died because the government made him take 2 shots and 3 boosters that he didn't need. This wasn't the first time the government lied to someone and they died, and it won't be the last. So you can see that that's a narrative related to the story, and it gives you what the larger meaning of the story that you as the reader need to be aware of. It's the allegory in it all. It's what you really need to be aware of, what the meaning of it all is. I could say Jesus wept, and then I could give you the narrative of that short story. I could say Jesus was nailed to the cross. He died for our sins, and he has given us all everlasting life. You can see that that's a powerful narrative. Every political movement must have a narrative. Okay, Hitler said that all of our problems are because of the Jews. We must exterminate all of the Jews. That was his narrative. And it didn't work out well for Hitler. So there's allegory, which is the hidden meaning, and that's what you were speaking to. And that's really the powerful thing about stories, is that you do learn something. And that's why people like true stories, because this could happen to me, because it happened, That's why they're so powerful.
Who is your inspiration? Well, I guess let's back it up. One question. Do you write every day? What is your
Yeah,
process?
when I have a novel or a true story that I'm telling, when I start, I write every day. I wake up and I make coffee and I write for about 70 minutes, a little over an hour. And then I put it down and then I'll come back to it the next day. And then usually before I write, I reread what I wrote the day before so I can get back into that, that feeling that I had when I stopped. And so it's seamless, I continue. But you write by eating an elephant in small bites, right? If you're going to eat an elephant, you can't do it in 2 bites. You're going to have to take a bunch of little bites. But if I can write 600-700 words a day, and that's usually what I shoot for, after 90 days, I've got, 50, 60,000 words. And that's a pretty good spot for most novels. Old Man and the Sea is really short. It's 26,000 words. That's a short novel and it's powerful. It's super. I wrote a short novel recently. I haven't published it yet, and it's 46,000. I was shooting for around 35, and I couldn't do it. It's harder to be brief. You leave more to the imagination of the reader when you write less, but that can be a good thing. My writing coach, who was Bill Robbins, he coached writers for the New York Times for 30 years, and I met him when I wrote Inside the Eye of the Tiger, which is a memoir by an LSU tennis coach. He just passed away, Jerry Simmons. His mother was married to Bill Robbins. And Bill saw an early draft of Jerry's memoir, and he said, I want to talk to this guy. And he said, Chris, you write like you've been writing for the sports page your whole life. And I pretty much had. And he broke me down and made me, I was about 32, it was about 20 years ago or more. And he said, it's all about the noun and the verb. You don't need a lot of ly adverbs. You don't need a whole bunch of other stuff in your writing. You need to unclutter your writing. And I remember he said, Jesus wept. What do you see when I say Jesus wept? And I said, I see Jesus. He's crucified. He's wearing the crown of thorns. There's blood trickling down his face, and he's crying. And he said, that's 2 words, and you got all that. And he said, you're Catholic, right? And I said, yes. And he said, you don't need a lot of words. What you need is you need a good noun and a good verb. But he said, to color your writing, you use the poetic devices. And there are many poetic devices. And to me, the most powerful is personification. Because personification is the most godlike. You're taking something that does not have life and you're making it human-like. And only God does that. But if you can invoke it in your writing, you're approaching the stuff of a master. And that's what Stephen King encourages you to. He wrote a really good book on writing that people aren't aware of. It's called On Writing, An Approach to the Craft. And I highly recommend you pick that up. He also talks about his addiction to cocaine in that book. It's quite interesting. And he's an alcoholic. And it's a pretty fascinating book because he reveals a lot about himself. He makes himself extremely vulnerable.
So who inspires you? Who are some other authors, or even in general, who inspires you?
I talked about Coach Dale Brown, the basketball coach at LSU. When I met him, I was 32. I wrote a SEC basketball book with his help. He wrote the afterword. He got one of his former players, Ricky Blanton, to write the foreword. And this was just the 3rd book I wrote. And I remember delivering the book to him and him saying to me, I want to be your mentor. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, it means I'm going to be your coach, man. I'm going to look out for you. He goes, you have talent. He goes, it's my job to see talent, and you have it. He goes, I'm going to tell you what I told Shaquille O'Neal. How successful do you want to be? He goes, there's room at the top, bud. He goes, I love you. You got talent. I'm never going to give up on you. And so he has told me that I can do these things, and he believes in me. And he has made a tremendous difference in my life. He never forgets my birthday. He calls me. And when you have somebody like that in your life, it makes a tremendous difference. And I've had loving parents and grandparents. That makes a difference. And, it helps to have people who care about you and who are rooting for you and who are your fans, but
yeah,
it's helpful to have a mentor. And I've been extremely fortunate to have Coach Dale Brown in my life. And he has not steered me wrong. He just continues to motivate me and tell me that I can do these things. And whatever you conceive and believe, you can achieve. You just got to be smart, got to work hard, and you can't give up. If you have a setback, in life, it's not really your IQ, it's your FQ. How many times are you willing to fail and get back up and try again and push yourself forward and learn from your mistakes and keep doing it? If you keep trying, after a while, they can't deny you. If you keep succeeding, after a while, you're a success, and that's it. And it's plain to see for everyone. And I haven't piled up a bunch of money, but I'm comfortable and I'm successful at what I do. And I imagine at some point, something that I write will really break through. But every book I've published, I've sold and reprinted. So people like my books. And so I'm a success in that way. And I'm happy with that. I like doing what I do. I'm passionate about it because I'm doing what I like and what I know that I'm supposed to be doing. And that gives me comfort and solace and makes me feel good about me, because each of us are given only so much talent. Some of us more talent than others. And if you're given a talent in the arts and you don't pursue it, you're sort of cheating yourself and you're cheating the person who gave you the talent, and that's God. Yeah. So it's difficult. I see the guitars hanging on the wall behind you. When I worked at Floribama for 10 years, I had so many talented friends that were really almost like savants in the way that they could create music and songs and poetry to music. And yet they had such a difficult plight in life. They barely paid their bills, that they were happy, but, so many of them struggle with other things in their lives. And I always thought, wow, it's really hard to be a singer-songwriter, because you have to write the song, you have to look good, you have to get up there on stage, and you have to present it in a way that really draws people to your art. And you have to be so many things to be successful in that business. It's almost unfair. It's unheard of to be the triple threat, and very few of them can, but they all have talent. Anybody who played at the Floribama was a talented person, without question. But only few people can break through and get on the radio and make $1 million playing music or writing songs and that sort of thing. And these people, they die younger than everyone else. It's proven. They have many other problems in their lives because it's really hard to cope with this talent they've been given, and they want to pursue it. But I really think what I do is a little bit easier, maybe, because a songwriter has to write the song. Well, I have to write the book, but I don't have to get up there and read the book to you. You can read the book on your own and draw inspiration and draw entertainment from it. I don't have to look real good to be an author. I don't have to get up there and recite my book to you. Now, it helps to be a good speaker. That's probably the best way to sell books, and I enjoy public speaking. I like to speak to people. It's really a way to let them get inside my head and say, I want to read one of his books. This guy's smart. So, but I still think it's really hard for people who want to pursue music and that type of creative art. I feel for them. I really do, because it's almost like a curse. You've been cursed with this talent to pursue music, and it's not easy. It's just not easy.
It is. It's tough. I think anything is not easy, but there's something about it. It's in your heart that won't let you not do it.
That's right.
You wouldn't be happy if you didn't do it. And so, yeah.
That's right. You find happiness, I think, more than most people, but you can look it up. A lot of the people who go into the music business die younger than everyone else. I think it's extremely stressful, and there's so many more setbacks along the way. And you can have stages of success, but still not really be successful monetarily. And you have to be creative in marketing yourself too. And I see so many people that really don't have a clue on how to do that either, because they're just tremendous. They have a wonderful dulcet voice. They can compose music, they can write lyrics, and yet nobody knows who they are. And here I am with all the books I've written, been on television and everything else. And, you know, I guess you could say that I haven't made it big either, but I don't think it's as stressful. I just think it's harder for someone in that business to get, you know, first of all, they can't sell their CDs anymore. They don't put them in automobiles. They don't make CDs.
Right. Yes.
That shocked me. I was so upset with that because that remains, you know, what now they try to sell the little jump drives to people. And I think most people my age look at it and go, what is that? You know, so
Yeah.
that's a cruel trick the music industry has played on all the artists, and they try to get their money for their music for nothing. Everybody's playing their stuff on YouTube, and it,
Yeah.
hit from every angle. And I just think it's unfair all the way around. So.
It's really just doing the shows and having merch and just building that small fan base. And, you know, I think my level of success, I feel that I'm successful because I'm able to do just what I love. Now, am I big time? No, but I guess it depends on your level of what success is for you, you know?
Absolutely. I agree. And you can be a good person. You can ascribe to be kind and good and thoughtful, and you can appreciate all those people who appreciate you, and that will make you happy. But I know you know what I'm talking about. The other people who don't even get to where you've been, you know, and who are just as talented as you know, but for whatever reason they don't get there. And you have to be pretty smart. You got to have your wits about you in addition to your talent. You have to have some business acumen, and that's what I'm speaking to. And not everyone has that. And
Yes,
so
definitely.
many super creative people that are almost savants that really lack awareness in that realm, the business realm. And they need somebody to help them, and they don't have anybody. And they sometimes fall through the cracks and become addicts or, you know, alcoholics, and
Yes.
they can't cope. And that's why you see so many people in the music business perish on average, you know, a decade or two before everybody else. And that's proven. So that's what I'm talking about. It's a, you know, Hunter Thompson, he has the famous quote, Hunter S. Thompson, he wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and a bunch of other books. But he said, let me get the quote correct. The music business is a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men go to die. And there's a negative side. So it's pretty bleak, you know, it's a tough gig, but you're right. You know, somebody's got to do it. And if it's in your heart, I think you can make it happen. But I'm just kind of speaking to you and your class of creative people. I saw so many of them at the Floor Bam, and I fell in love with all of them and what they do. And Joe, the guy who started the place, you know, he spawned the Songwriter Festival, and you should become a part of that. You're not too far away. I think you'd really enjoy it. I could get you in touch with the people who would definitely have you part of that. But that's a
Definitely.
wonderful event every year, and they honor people like you across the country and the world to let them come and network, and they treat you well and pay you well to come and share your music and your songs. And I just think that's a neat thing. So.
Thank you. We'll talk more
Yeah,
after our
definitely.
interview. I'll try to wrap this up, but I still have several questions. This has been so incredible, and I don't really want to and you've kind of already mentioned, but what do you find most rewarding about your path?
You know, I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm using my strengths. I think all of us should gravitate toward our strengths. When we go to school, it's sort of like a personal mountain climbing test for your ability. You know, everybody's going to climb the mountain, but everybody's going to learn different footholds. Everyone's going to learn a different way to do it. And then you're going to learn about yourself. And you know, you get the degree in high school, and you should have an idea what your passion is, or what you're good at, what your strengths are. And you should gravitate towards a career that expounds upon your strengths. Your strengths are your talents, and those are your gifts that were given to you by the Creator. And you should know what those are by the time you're 18, 19, 20. You might have to take a year or two off. Guys are notorious for not maturing earlier in life. Women mature at 21, men at 43. That's average. You can look that up, which is a cruel trick that nature plays on men. Most men at 43 have families, you know, and they're still not mature. And that's average, keep in mind. You could be 50 in a guy and not mature. So it's tough. I know not everybody readily understands what their strengths are, but you need to try and tell young people, what is it that you're good at? What do you think you'd be good at? What makes you happy? What do you see yourself doing? Those are all questions you need to ask. And that's why I'm happy, because I'm doing what I'm good at. There are a few people who can do what I do as good as I do it. And so I know I found a niche that I need to be in. So that makes me happy. I find solace in that.
What is one of the biggest wins that you've had? What is something that you're super proud of?
I'm super proud of getting both of my girls into college and getting scholarships and seeing them through graduation and making sure they're good people in life. They both are. And so I'm really proud of that. Most people who have kids, I always take a look at their kids. And if their kids do well, that really buoys my impression of them, because it takes a lot to be a good parent, to give of yourself and sacrifice. And if you do that, to me, you're a good person. And I was fortunate that my girls were both smart, both have good minds, and all I ever did was read to them when they were little. And they're just good people. And so I kind of lucked out too, but I'm very proud of where they are in life. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations. And I'm sure they're very proud of you. Proud to call you dad.
I hope.
What do you find most challenging?
Most challenging, I would say, marketing myself, I think, is the most challenging thing as a creative person, because I tend to just want to focus on the next project, the next big thing, because that's really what I live for. I really live for writing the story. So challenging is, for me, coming up with the next story. Right now I'm kind of at a point where I've just moved, and buying a house and moving and getting furniture and all the things you have to do to move. It's so emotionally distressing. And so I've been going through that, and I recently finished a novel, and I don't have anything that I'm working on right now. So that's sort of a challenge for me right now. I don't have a new book that I'm writing, and I'm wondering what it's going to be. And so that's a challenge right now for me. What am I going to write about next? I could just pick up and come up with an idea. Someone pitched something really good to me recently, and I already wrote the synopsis. And so I usually, when I write the synopsis, I will write the book. So I need to pursue that and get into that. But there's only so many minutes in the day, and that's why I write at the beginning of the day, because then I got to go do all the other stuff, the business side of things. I got to go sell books. I got to go speak. I got to go travel and all of that. So it's challenging when I don't have a new book to write, but I have one right now, but I haven't gotten to that point where I've started writing every day. And once I start that, I usually don't stop until I finish. So it's just being disciplined, following that order that I've set for myself. But I'm pretty tough and disciplined. It's just a matter of getting there. And then once I start, I'm really happy, because I love the whole process. I love waking up with coffee, and I love writing. It's fun for me. That's my groove. And but it is challenging to get down to brass tacks to actually do it, because it takes energy to create. People don't realize that. I don't think that it's definitely taxing on you. You have to focus. I don't have writer's block, but I have to focus to be creative. I have to really think about it, and I do need some peace. And so I don't watch a lot of TV. I still try to read. I don't read as much as I did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I read all the time, constantly reading. And I don't read as much now I'm older, and that's how you become a good writer. You have to read good writing above all else.
Excellent. One thing I didn't mention, you have a new book that you've just released.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Mamu. It's these guys decide to rob the Mamu State Bank in South Louisiana on Ash Wednesday when all the cops are drunk and hungover. I'll give you the quick synopsis. Okay, Arnie O'Rourke is down on his luck in paradise. He lives on a sailboat in Perdido Key, Florida, under the Bar Bridge, and a Category 1 hurricane approaches, and he decides to flee. But he leaves his computers for his architecture business, all his files, all his valuables in the sailboat, and he takes off. And it sinks his sailboat. And in the first scene, he's looking at the damage, the boat sunk in the water, and his cell phone rings, and it's Cutter LeBlanc from Monmouth, Louisiana, a guy that he had met when he designed a planned development outside Lafayette. And Cutter showed up to cut the sugarcane one last time. They became fast friends. And Cutter says, "Hey man, the Cajun Navy's on its way. I'll meet you at the Floribama tonight. You can stay with me. I've got a room next door." So they meet up, and Cutter brings with him a set of architectural plans he's inherited from his grandfather of the Monmouth State Bank circa 1943. And Arnie's an architect, and he looks at it and he says, "Why are you showing me this, man?" And he says, "Well, I've cased the bank for 6 months. We're going to rob it on Ash Wednesday. All the cops will be drunk and hungover." And Arnie is down on his luck. His wife has left him for another man. So his sailboat's gone. All his files are gone. He's destitute. He thinks this is his way out. So he's in. But they need help. So they go to Mobile on Joe Kane Day, and they get the help of a computer geek who owns a computer repair shop. He's going to handle all the alarm concerns. And then they go to New Orleans, and they get this big black guy, Pork Chop, who's got meat hooks for arms. He's going to pry open all the safety deposit boxes. He's been to Angola and done time for robbing banks. And then they go to Monmouth, Louisiana on Mardi Gras Day, and they don the traditional mask and capuchon, the mitre cap, and they party all day with the locals, nap, and wake up just after midnight to rob the bank. And they find more fun than money in themselves and new girlfriends in this unforgettable holiday allegory, in which I dispel once and for all the pervasive myth that Alabama started Mardi Gras. The first Mardi Gras was in 1703 in Mobile, in North America. But at the time, Mobile was the capital of French Louisiana. Alabama didn't become a state until 116 years later. Yet everyone in Alabama, when I lived there, said, "Alabama started Mardi Gras, huh?" Well, it was in Mobile, but Mobile was the capital of French Louisiana. Mardi Gras is tied to Catholicism. It's the pre-Lenten fast. The pre-Lenten soiree before the fast. It's when you ate all the meatier and fatty foods before Mardi Gras, where you had to abstain and be more abstemious. It's called Carnival, which is from the Latin term carnivalarium, which is without meat. So that's my new book. I think it's probably the best bet of becoming a film. I think it would make a great movie with all the Mardi Gras festivities and just the plot. It's a lot of fun. And Cutter's quite the interesting character. And Arnie, certainly you can develop empathy for Arnie as the protagonist. But kind of each of the compadres there, the four of them, the four musketeers as they go to rob the bank, you empathize with each of them. They're all good guys and their girlfriends that they pick up along the way. So it's a lot of fun. It's quite the romp. It's a holiday fest, really. It's a fun read. It's called Mamu, and you can go to the Mamu the novel and find out about it. And chriswarnerauthor.com. You can find out more about me there and contact me if you like. So.
I think I just have one more question.
Okay.
If listeners have a dream but haven't started or having challenges, what would you recommend? What is your advice?
For people that what? For
chasing their dreams, or maybe maybe it's a musician, maybe it's someone that's thinking about writing a book or working on a movie or just doing anything creatively.
Yeah, you have to fight through the setbacks, because a lot of times when you succeed and you get the thing that you wanted to do done, your life really doesn't change much. You're still where you were before, but you have to take solace in the fact that you succeeded in what you're trying to do, and you need to build on that. If you keep moving forward, you're getting closer to the ideal. You're becoming a better you. And, the term is called self-actualization, becoming the best you can be. It's the pyramid of success, and that's the pinnacle everyone shoots for. And the neat thing about self-actualization is that you've reached a level of success where you can take care of all of your needs, your sustenance needs, your clothing needs. You have friends and admirers, but you can help other people. And And life is not always what you get or what you have, it's what you become for others. So take that to heart, keep trying, keep giving your all, believe in yourself, keep doing what you do, keep getting better at what you do. Keep in mind that Leonardo da Vinci, with all his many talents, they found his notebooks, and he would practice drawing all the ideas that he had. He more than 2 or 3 dozen times he worked on that mouth of Mona Lisa that looks like she's smiling and frowning simultaneously. But so many times he would write to himself in the margins, he'd say, "What is it that you have done, Leonardo, that they've ever made? What is it that you've really accomplished, Leonardo?" He was toying with himself. He's like, you make all these drawings and this is all in your head, and like, what is it that you've really done, Leonardo? He's messing with himself, he's having doubts about himself, so even someone who's a genius like him, there's always, you wonder what other people are going to think about what it is that you're doing, that you're so focused upon. And so I think that's difficult, but you can't give up. And Leonardo, he probably was, to me, he was the greatest creator ever. If you really look at everything that he did in his lifetime, and it was short, but he just never stopped wondering about the world and how he could solve all these questions in his head. And that's really what it's all about. If you're a thinking, feeling person, find the answers, do those things, engage yourself, see if you can do them, put in the time and just keep trying. Don't give up. Be like Leonardo, have doubts, but push forward, work harder. Don't kill yourself. Take time to enjoy life, but you can do it. Find the strength, push yourself. And if you can't do it today, there's always tomorrow. Wake up and go at it again. So that's the advice I'd give somebody.
Thank you so much. This has been incredible. Tell us once more where we can find your books.
Yeah, you can find a lot of my books on Amazon Kindle. I do not sell the hard copy books on Amazon any longer, but you can get Kindle downloads. You can go to Apple Books and Google Books. I have a bunch listed there under my name, Chris Warner. You can go to chriswarnerauthor.com, or for the new novel, Mamu the Novel, MAMOUTHENOVEL.com. So all those places. Bonnie, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed sharing with you my passion, and hopefully it will motivate some other creative people to continue to be passionate about their gifts and what they've been given and their talents. I wish everyone well.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. This has been absolutely incredible.
Send me a message and tell me what you thought of this interview. If you'd like to connect with Chris, see the link in the show notes and be sure to order his new book and check out all of his others. They're so incredible. How about writing a synopsis for your week on getting closer to what it is that makes you happy? What will your beginning, middle, and end be to get you closer to losing weight or writing that book or riding a horse in the Yellowstone TV series? If you have a topic you'd like me to talk about or someone you'd like me to interview, send me a message at bonnie@bonnielang.com, and please help share this podcast. As an independent podcaster, creating and producing a podcast takes time, effort, and resources. It requires a lot of dedication and passion to keep it going. If you enjoy tuning into my podcast, please consider supporting me by making a donation, whether it's a one-time donation on Venmo or a monthly contribution through my positivity group. Every little bit helps and is greatly appreciated. Your support means the world to me, and I'm deeply grateful for any amount that you can give. And thank you for listening. Visit bonnielang.com/ignite to join the group and support this podcast with a small monthly contribution. I hope you have a wonderful day, sending you peace, love, happiness, and hugs. And don't forget to subscribe.